Howdy, everybody. Dr. Andy Woods here. I'm the pastor teacher here at Sugarland Bible Church. This is being released on October the 25th, 2024. This is prophecy. This is a prophecy update, but this is Pastor's Point of View number 325. And here are the areas that we're going to look at in this particular prophecy update. In this session, we're going to be dealing with a little bit of information, bring you up to speed on rumblings concerning the third temple. Some interesting developments concerning gold in Israel. We'll also show you how the world, just like God said it would in the last days, is turning against Israel. And then I'll bring you up to speed a little bit on some of the latest developments related to the Gog-Magog, Ezekiel 38 and 39 scenario. Let's go ahead and start with the temple. We know that the third temple, the building of the third temple, is going to play a monumental role in the end times scenario. And we know that from Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, a verse, if you're a regular viewer of ours, you no doubt know very, very well. And it's I won't read the whole verse, but as you know, it's a prophecy about the 7-year tribulation period, giving really specific details, including the fact that the Antichrist will desecrate the temple midway through the tribulation period. And here is an overview or a graphic of Daniel 9:27. It gives you the outline of the 7-year tribulation period and tells you what is going to happen right at the midpoint. The desecration of the temple by the Antichrist, something obviously that can't happen unless you have a third temple in Jerusalem, something that the nation of Israel, a temple, has not had for the last 2,000 years. Here is a graphic, or a list, I should say, showing you Israel's 4 temples. The first temple was built by Solomon, destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Second temple was rebuilt by the returnees from the Babylonian captivity, destroyed by Titus of Rome in AD 70, and ever since that point in time, the nation of Israel hasn't had a temple, but we know that one has to be built. We call that temple number 3. You'll see on the list the various scriptures you can look up on your own that show you that the third temple has to exist at some point for the Antichrist to desecrate. So any kind of movement within the nation of Israel talking about the rebuilding of temple number 3 shows us how close we are to the coming 7-year tribulation period. We don't know exactly how and when that temple is going to be rebuilt. The only thing we know with certitude is that it has to be functioning midway through the tribulation period. Some Bible prophecy teachers have put it this way: when the discussion of the world turns towards Israel, you're dealing with God's hour hand on his clock. When the discussion of the world gets more specific and begins to talk about Jerusalem, now you're dealing with the minute hand. And when the discussion of the world begins to deal with the temple, rebuilding temple number 3 on the Temple Mount, now you're dealing with the second hand. So with all of that being said, that's why I found this particular article from jns.org, October 21st, 2024. So interesting. The title of the article is "With Eyes on Winning War, Building Third Jewish Temple." Interesting. An Ark replica was shown in Jerusalem. The subtitle is "Now We Can See with Our Own Eyes Something Which We Have Missed for 2,000 Years," said a particular Israeli scholar. So just a little bit from this particular article. It says, a replica of the Ark of the Covenant, painstakingly constructed, its creators say, to the Torah specifications of the sacred vessel that was the first temple central fixture, was displayed in Jerusalem on Sunday evening during the intermediate displays of the Sukkot holiday. The ark described in the Torah, which housed the Ten Commandments tablets, among other holy objects, was hidden after the destruction of the first temple rabbinic Judaism. It's a lengthy article, and unfortunately we don't have time to read it all, but I would encourage you to find it, download it, and read it. But just a little bit more from it, a bit of the way into the article. It says, in biblical times prior to the temple, there was likely two arks, one housing the Ten Commandments that was always in the temple, and the other which led the Jewish army in battle, according to Jake, who's one of the scholars who is looking into this. The article goes on and it says, when Hamas terrorists penetrated Israeli villages and the kibbutzim on October the 7th, 2023, and murdered and raped civilians, they shouted in Arabic that God is great, according to Tal, one of the commentators being interviewed here, as if they are fighting for God. The terrorists called the war which they launched the Al-Aqsa Jerusalem flood. They didn't do that in order to expand their backyard or to improve their educational system, Tal said. No, they did that for Jerusalem, for the Temple Mount. They wanted to prevent the unity that this ark represents. The Jewish people are fighting not just Hamas, not just to bring back security to Gaza or the northern border in Lebanon or against Iran, Tal added. We are fighting to bring back to the world the unity that the ark, the temple, and Jerusalem represent. The article goes on and it quotes particular scholars saying, now we can see with our own eyes something that we have missed for 2,000 years. So this is a very interesting article because it shows you that the nation of Israel, at least in their own mind, is linking the ark to temple number 3, which they want to rebuild. And that's the significance of them, producing this replica of the ark. And the nation of Israel recognizes the connection. And according to this article, it's interesting that Hamas recognizes that connection as well. And that's why they launched that attack from Gaza into Israel, according to the article, October the 7th of last year. So this is a very interesting development because it shows you the hunger in the nation of Israel to eventually rebuild temple number 3, which Bible prophecy mandates must be functioning midway through the tribulation period. And it also shows us that this connection between the ark and the temple exists in the minds of Hamas, which arguably contributed to the mindset leading to the attack on October the 7th. So there's a lot more going on in Israel than just border dispute, land dispute. It's really a battle concerning who controls the Temple Mount. Is the Islamic interpretation of the Temple Mount going to be predominant, or is the Jewish interpretation of the Temple Mount going to be predominant? I mean, we consider these things very interesting because this mindset ultimately is going to lead to, amongst the Jews, temple number 3. And so any kind of rumblings within Israel concerning temple number 3 and their desire to rebuild temple number 3, shows us where we are on God's prophetic stopwatch. I mean, we're very, very closely nearing the 7-year tribulation period, which means that the rapture of the church, which precedes the tribulation period, is going to come even faster. Let's go to sort of a related subject. This takes us to bullet point number 2, and this has to do with Israel's wealth. Let me draw your attention to a couple of verses in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38 and verse 12. It says, to capture spoil, to seize plunder, to turn your hand against the waste places which are now inhabited, and against the peoples or people who are gathered from the nations who have acquired cattle and goods and live at the center of the world. It's a very interesting prophecy because it's in those famous chapters that we're going to talk about a little later, Ezekiel 38 and 39, which predicts a conglomeration of nations invading the land of Israel in the last days, spearheaded by Russia, Iran, and Turkey. And that verse there that we just had on the screen gives you the motivation of the attackers. They're coming for Israel's wealth. And what specific wealth are they coming after? I'm glad you asked. Notice Ezekiel 38 and verse 13. It says, Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish with all its villages will say, have you come to capture spoil? Have you assembled your company to seize plunder, to carry away silver and gold? Notice that, silver and gold. To take away cattle and goods and to capture great spoil. That verse is interesting because it specifies the specific kind of wealth that the nations are coming after when they plunder Israel in the end times. And it mentions their metal, or silver and gold. And a lot of our discussion about this wealth has centered on things like, oil discoveries in the land of Israel, natural gas discovered off the Israeli coastline, the gross domestic product of the nation of Israel coming from a barren expanse to what the nation is today, that Israel is the home of countless millionaires and billionaires in the world. And what's interesting is, although all of that discussion is very valuable and very interesting, the Bible actually goes a step further and gives you the type of wealth that the nations are going to come to plunder. And it specifically says gold. And so we have anticipated for a long time some kind of gold discovery within the land of Israel. We've done prior broadcasts on that. That's why I found this particular article by the Gateway Pundit so interesting. It's again a relatively recent article, October 21st, 2024. It says the Israeli Defense Force has declassified the exact location of where Hezbollah is hiding millions in gold and cash. In other words, as Israel is doing quite well, according to most analysts, in her war against Hezbollah in Lebanon, it almost looks like Israel is about to get her hands on vast quantities of gold controlled by Hezbollah. So here's what the article says. It says, Israeli Defense Forces spokesman Hagari let the entire world know the exact location where Hezbollah is hiding millions in gold and cash that it uses to fund its terrorist activities. In a video released by IDF, Hagari shared, tonight we're exposing Hezbollah's financial network and how Hezbollah uses its funds to fund its terrorist activities. Hezbollah's financial network is based on two main sources of income: money from the Iranian regime and money from the Lebanese people. Iran's Quds forces transfer money to Hezbollah from Iranian oil sold in Syria. Iran also sends suitcases of cash and gold by planes to the Iranian embassy in Beirut, and then it goes directly to Hezbollah. One of our main targets last night was an underground vault with millions of dollars in cash and gold. The money was being used to finance Hezbollah's attacks on Israel. The vault was deliberately located under a residential building. Our strikes will degrade Hezbollah's ability to finance its attacks on Israelis. Tonight I'm disclosing, or I'm going to rather declassify intelligence on a site that we did not strike where Hezbollah has millions of dollars in gold in cash in Hassan Nasrallah's bunker. Where is the bunker located? Directly under the Al-Sahil hospital in Beirut. Hezbollah built this bunker directly underneath the hospital. There are hundreds of millions of dollars in cash and gold inside the bunker right now. I'm calling on the Lebanese government, Lebanese authorities, and the international organizations. Don't allow Hezbollah to use the money for terror to attack Israel. The Israeli force is monitoring the compound, as you can see. The article concludes by saying, tonight I'm going to declassify intelligence on a site that we did not strike, where Hezbollah has millions of dollars in gold and cash in Hassan Nasrallah's bunker. Where is the bunker located? Directly under the hospital in the heart of Beirut. So interesting development as Israel is having success in its war against Hezbollah in Beirut, in Lebanon, etc. Could it be that the Israelis in this success are about to get their hands on all of this gold? And if they get their hands on millions of dollars of gold, it certainly makes the Ezekiel 38 verses 12 and 13 scenario, extremely credible, because Ezekiel is very clear that the nations will come to plunder Israel on account of her gold. So some of the critics of our interpretation of Ezekiel 38 and 39 have said, well, you guys talk about the wealth of Israel, but you don't take it literally because it mentions gold there. And I think God is arranging things in such a way where that's not going to be a problem anymore. What we're going to see is the nations will come against Israel because of her gold, and the Bible will once again be literally vindicated. God means what he says and says what he means. So we bring that to your attention as sort of another stage-setting reality of the coming end-time scenario. Let's jump gears, if we could, and go to our third major category, and this has to do with the world against Israel. The world against Israel, and sort of as a biblical jumping off point, we like to use Zechariah chapter 12 and verse 3. Notice what Zechariah says. It will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured. All the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. And notice the parallel passage over in Zechariah chapter 14 and verse 2. He says, therefore I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be captured, the houses plundered, the women ravished, and half of the city exiled, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. So these are two verses that we like to quote a lot on our program because it shows you that the Holy Spirit anticipates that the entire world, the United States of America included, will come against the nation of Israel in the last days. And I mentioned the United States of America because we're living in a time period right now under the Biden administration. I call it the Biden regime, where our own country, almost in an unprecedented way, is turning against its faithful ally in the Middle East, the nation of Israel. Right on cue, right on time, consistent with Zechariah's prophecies given 2,500 years ago. Let me give you some evidence of that. Notice this particular article from the dailymail.com, October the 9th, 2024. It says, President Biden called Netanyahu a bad, and he uses some profanity, blanking guy, a son of a blank, and accused him of regularly lying to him. Biden's frustrations and distrust of Netanyahu reportedly erupted last spring. The article says Joe Biden vented his anger at Benjamin Netanyahu in a series of profanity-laden rants, accusing the Israeli Prime Minister of regularly lying to him during the war in Gaza, according to a bombshell new book. The U.S. president labeled Netanyahu a bad blanking guy and son of a blank in conversations with his associates. Journalist Bob Woodward writes in his new insider account. President Biden's frustration and distrust of Netanyahu erupted last spring, Woodward writes, as the war in Gaza became increasingly destructive and spread into Rafah, a southern area of the Strip where many refugees had fled. Joe Biden vented his anger at Netanyahu in a series of profanity-laden rants, accusing the Israeli Prime Minister of regularly lying to him during the war in Gaza, according to this bombshell book. So of all of Biden's weaknesses, one of them appears to be anger, and he appears to have a growing anger at Benjamin Netanyahu. Here's another article demonstrating the deterioration of the relationship between America and the nation of Israel. This is an article from Breitbart, October 15th, 2024. It says the Biden-Harris administration quietly threatens an arms embargo against Israel. The article says the Biden administration is quietly threatening an arms embargo against Israel, citing humanity concerns about the war in Gaza, where Hamas continues to hold Israeli hostages while Israel tries to stop it from regrouping. The revelation about a potential arms embargo came Tuesday in a leaked letter from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to his Israeli counterpart, Lloyd Austin, threatening to withhold weapons if the Gaza situation deteriorates. Countries that fall short of the standard of international law as judged by the bureaucrats at the State Department, widely considered to have an anti-Israel bias. Let me read that clause again. Widely considered to have an anti-Israel bias, could lose their access to American weapons as a result. The article says left-wing critics of Israel have been demanding an arms embargo on Israel since the start of the war. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee for president, told pro-Palestinian activists in August that she would be open to discussing an arms embargo on Israel. In other words, Israel, we're going to deny you what you need to root out terrorism and Hamas in Gaza. We know Harris, who's running for president, has a disdain for Netanyahu. When Netanyahu came to visit the United States and give his speech before the Congressional Joint Session, Harris was a no-show. Harris and Biden did not even greet Netanyahu at the airport when he came for one of his visits. And it looks like the United States is marching according to the dictates of international law and our own State Department, which have had for a very long time a built-in anti-Israel bias. Here is yet another article demonstrating the deteriorating relationship between the United States of America and the nation of Israel. This particular article comes from, let's see here, therightscoop.com, October the 9th, 2024. It says, breaking report, Biden warned Netanyahu that he would not defend Israel if they attack Iran nuclear facilities without United States coordination. The article says it's being reported that that Joe Biden told Prime Minister Netanyahu that he would not defend Israel if they attack Iran's nuclear facilities without U.S. coordination, and Iran retaliates. This was reported by a BBC reporter who attributed this to Israeli media. Here's what Jeremy Bowen reported above in part. Quote, there are reports in the Israeli media which I can firstly confirm, suggesting that one of the things which was said in that call was if Israel went ahead with a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities without coordinating with Americans, i.e., getting their permission, then Americans would not use their defensive powers to protect Israel from any retaliation. Biden, in this particular article, said of Netanyahu, he would always have Netanyahu's back because much of this is his fault anyway. Now, this is actually not a quote from Biden, but it's commentary on Biden. The article says of Biden, he should always have Netanyahu's back because much of this is his fault anyway. He is the one who gave Iran billions of dollars, and they are using that to fund their terrorist activities against Israel. Now, keep in mind, folks, that when Donald Trump left the Oval Office, Iran was on the ropes. Trump had essentially bankrupted her. But because of the policies of Joe Biden and the Iran nuclear deal, now Iran's coffers are filled with money. And so now Iran has the means to vent its built-in anti-Semitism coming from its Shiite Islamic doctrine against Israel. And just within a very recent time period, going back to about mid-April of this year, Iran completely took the mask off, and she launched, I think, about 300 projectiles, if I've got the number right, from Iran proper into the land of Israel. And then she did the same thing within the last couple of weeks. So Iran, the mask is completely off. Iran is not working through her proxies, the Hezbollah and the Houthis, anymore to come against Israel. She's attacking Israel directly with projectiles fired from Iran into the land of Israel, into Tel Aviv, into Jerusalem, etc., etc., etc. Now, who do you blame for that situation? Well, you blame Joe Biden for that situation. Because if the policies of Donald Trump were still in place, Iran would still be on the ropes, so to speak, financially. But Biden has enriched Iran. So this whole situation has been created by Biden. And keep that in mind when Kamala Harris, running for vice president, when she's asked by media, when she's given honest interviews, which is kind of few and far between, she's asked, would you do anything differently than what the Biden administration has done for the last 3.5 years? And she basically said no. So the policies that are in place will continue should Kamala Harris become the president of the United States. And now Biden comes out, according to therightscoop.com, in a situation that he himself caused, and says, you know what, Israel, if you go it alone and you attack Iran's nuclear facilities to stop this problem, and if Iran reacts against you by attacking you, you can expect no help from the United States of America in terms of a defense. So not only did Biden create this situation, but now if Israel doesn't conduct its warfare the way Biden thinks it should be conducted, Biden is saying that the United States will not protect Israel. This is how this current regime is treating our faithful ally in the Middle East, the nation of Israel. And this is an outworking, I believe, of Zechariah's prophecies that the entire world will turn against Israel, even including the late, great United States of America. In other words, Israel, as you deal with Iran, don't act unilaterally. Don't do what our country did with Iraq, Afghanistan, where we acted unilaterally without United Nations permission in the wake of 9/11, etc. Don't do what we did You better get our permission before you act. So obviously there's total hypocrisy as the United States pursues this Joe Biden mindset. We have here a couple of other things I want to show you. These are two maps. The first one is the map there of the West Bank in that lighter blue area. The second is that lighter brown area, the same territory, rightfully called Samaria and Judea. And essentially what the world community wants Israel to do is they want to give up the West Bank. I prefer the name Judea and Samaria. And they think that if they relinquish that territory and give it to the Palestinians, then somehow peace is going to break out in the region, where all you have to look at is the southwest portion of the map, Gaza, where Israel did that with Gaza in 2004. In 2005, the citizens of Gaza had one and only one election. They elected Hamas, and ever since that point in time, that area has been used as a terrorist beachhead, whether tunnels or projectiles, into the land of Israel. And if the two-state solution didn't work at all with Gaza, how in the world do you think it's going to work with that lighter brown area called the West Bank or Judea and Samaria? And if this policy called the two-state solution, which is nothing more than a prerequisite for the final solution, goes through, then you're going to put Israel into an indefensible position by reducing her width to less than 10 miles. And so what's so fascinating about this is the nations in their drunken state are all piling on now, demanding that Israel pursue this two-state solution. And this, under the Biden regime, is the official policy of the United States of America. Just to show us that this is true, let me draw your attention to this Times of Israel article. This is dated fairly recently, September the 25th, 2024. And this is what it says. It says, United States officials weighing steps Biden could take to preserve two states after the election. In other words, the article is outlining what Biden can do as a lame duck. Let's pretend he loses this upcoming election. There's about a 2-3 month window there in between election day and inauguration of the next president. Biden can put into place all kinds of things which will cause all kinds of problems against the nation of Israel, and this article is outlining those problems. So don't think that just because Biden loses this upcoming election, he may not. I don't know what's going to happen. But he can do an awful lot of damage in between election day 2024 and inauguration day January 2025. The article says U.S. officials have been deliberating steps that the administration could take during the lame duck period to curb the effort by Prime Minister Netanyahu's government to expand Israel's footprint in the West Bank, a current and a former U.S. official told the Times this week. The nearly 3-month period from November 5th to January 20th, Inauguration Day, will come with additional flexibility, which will allow space for more confrontational policies vis-a-vis the Israeli government, said the current U.S. official. The list of steps President Joe Biden could take would be longer if President Kamala Harris wins the election, since she is less likely to reverse them, the official explained. The former senior U.S. official acknowledged certain steps would be less likely taken if former President Donald Trump wins the election, because he would be able to roll them back upon returning to office. However, some policies will be implemented anyway because they would set a precedent that would give other Western countries the legitimacy to follow suit, As with the case with the sanctions that the Biden administration began implementing against extremist settlers in the West Bank. So whoever wins the election, Trump or Harris, Biden can do an awful lot of damage to the American-Israeli relationship in between Election Day 2024 and Inauguration Day 2025. And the article, and I won't read the whole thing to you, just want to let you know what's in here so you can read it on your own, lists these various things that Biden can do. One option is sanctioning Ben-Gvir, the individual within Israel that aggressively wants Temple number 3 rebuilt. Another one is settlement relabeling. Another option that Biden has is reopening the consulate. Another option that Biden would have at his fingertips is leveraging U.S. aid to Israel. And a final option is what we've been talking about here, moving towards what the article calls a realistic two-state solution. So this is all very interesting in light of Zechariah's prophecies because it indicates that the world is turning against Israel just like God said it would in the last days. And even a faithful ally like the United States of America is turning against the nation of Israel very, very sadly. Notice this particular screenshot. This I found on X, and it's Donald Trump speaking. And this is what Trump says. This is entitled, "We Have an Enemy from Within." He says, "A bad thing happened today. The entire plan of Israel was leaked, including the highest level plans, highly confidential information. It was leaked by someone on our side." In other words, someone within the deep state of the United States of America leaked this information. That speaks of the built-in anti-Israel bias in our own State Department that we read about a little earlier. This continues on, and it says they have no idea who did it. They leaked all the information about how Israel is going to fight, where they're going to go, and the strategies that they will use. The person responsible for this leak is a serious concern. We have an enemy from within. And there he is, as recorded by Fox News, making this particular statement. What side of the ledger does this put the United States of America on? This anti-Israel mentality. When we look at Genesis 12, verse 3, where God all the way back to Israel's foundation said, "I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." We also know that CBS recently aired something that's extremely anti-Israel. Notice this particular statement made on X by David Freeman of Israel. And you notice what it says here: CBS challenges Jerusalem's capital status. CBS now has said, do not refer to Jerusalem as being in Israel. Folks, Jerusalem has been in Israel going back 3,000 years to the time of David. And it was Donald Trump, you'll remember, 2017, who moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of undivided Israel, which was a great move from our standpoint. But here CBS is pretending like that move never happened. Notice what Mr. Friedman says to what CBS just aired. Jerusalem is recognized by the United States as the capital of Israel. The U.S. Embassy to Israel sits in Jerusalem. The U.S. ambassador to Israel lives in Jerusalem. While this was all achieved by President Trump, the policy has been maintained and endorsed even by President Biden. And yet the CBS network is doing its best to deny this unassailable truth. Shame on CBS. And the rest of the world. Remember what the prior article I read indicated. Even if Trump wins the election, the damage that Biden can do in between election day and inauguration day will be significant because other Western style democracies will imitate the pattern of Biden and put into place permanent anti-Israel policies. And that's exactly what's happening. The world is sort of piling on against Israel, exactly like Zechariah said. You'll notice this particular item that I also found on X. It says the European Union will actively support and engage with international partners on concrete, irreversible steps towards the two-state solution, which we mentioned earlier, reviving a political process to this end, including through the holding of an international peace conference as soon as possible, close quote. So there's Europe wanting this two-state solution. It's kind of interesting when you look at the prophecies of Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. I don't have a slide on this per se, but the Antichrist is going to come out of that sort of revived Roman Empire. And so the European Union is sort of a key development in the construction of that political apparatus that the Antichrist will arise out of. The Antichrist will be very anti-Israel. And so as sort of a harbinger of things to come, stage setting, if you will, we see this anti-Israel mentality ingrained as they're calling for this two-state solution from the European Union. Notice this other excerpt from Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, who says the entire world must stop supplying weapons to Israel. World Times reports breaking in a good move for humanity and peace. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says the entire world must stop supplying weapons to Israel. So what Biden and Harris are doing in threatening an arms embargo against Israel is catching on like wildfire, and it's spreading throughout the world. One more on this particular subject, if I may. Notice again this excerpt, and it says, breaking, Ireland to officially suspend trade with Israel. Quote, Ireland will not wait for everybody in Europe to move on this issue, close quote. So there's Ireland saying we're not going to trade with Israel anymore. Turkey, by the way, has already done that. And any political science class, government class I ever had, one of my majors in college was political science. They always taught us that a trade war, precedes always a physical war. And so when these nations are, whether it's Turkey, Ireland, saying we're not going to trade with the nation of Israel anymore, which, by the way, is silly because of the tremendous products that the Israelis make. But when they say we're not going to trade with you anymore, that's a precursor of a physical war that they're most likely contemplating. So just like Zechariah said, right in our time period, the world globally is turning against Israel. And this takes us now to bullet point number 4, which gives us the specifics of that hatred, which is the looming Gog-Magog invasion. Notice this particular map that we frequently use. These are the players that will come against Israel in the last days, according to Ezekiel's prophecies made 2,600 years ago. Russia and Turkey and Iran, and watch this, and the Sudan in northern Africa is also going to play a role in this invasion. Speaking of northern Africa, as will Libya, alongside the Sudan, will invade Israel. And of course, on a broadcast like this, I don't have the time to go into why we think Turkey is mentioned in Ezekiel 38:39. Russia is mentioned, Iran is mentioned, and those nations in North Africa are mentioned, such as the Sudan. I do recommend the book that I wrote on this topic entitled The Middle East Meltdown, where you can get the documentation for that if you're interested. But this prophecy is talking about a raw and unbridled invasion of the nation of Israel by these various nations. And the Bible is very clear that this invasion will be conducted for purposes of plunder. In other words, these nations will have no legitimate reason for coming into the nation of Israel aggressively other than their own greed. Now, they kind of mask this as, well, these countries, particularly Islamic countries, have some kind of right to their land. But the truth of the matter is, when you look at Islamic sources, let's talk about the Quran just for a minute. And keep in mind that Islam dominates all of those nations that we just mentioned, with the possible exception of Rosh or Russia. But according to the Quran itself, the name Jerusalem is not even found. There's a faint reference to the furthest mosque, and the Muslims kind of turned that into Jerusalem. And why? Because they became jealous that Israel became economically prosperous post-1948, and suddenly they started to pretend that Jerusalem was the third holiest site within Islam. It's not, because the Quran never mentions Jerusalem. Compare that to the scripture, where the Bible mentions Jerusalem, I think, 800 times. And so these Islamic powers, these Islamic forces, have no legitimate claim to Israel. Their holy places are Mecca and Medina. And they like to say, well, Jerusalem is our third holiest site because that's where, Muhammad allegedly ascended back to Allah on a steed named Barak. But they have to rewrite their original Islamic sources to get that mindset to work, because the original Islamic sources make no actual claim to the city of Jerusalem as being Islamic. So when this invasion occurs, it will not be because Islam has some kind of right to the land. It'll be because of unbridled greed, the desire to get their hands on Israel's gold and silver. That's why I found this particular article fascinating from Memory, October 16th, 2024. The title of it is Lebanese Shiite Islamic Scholar Husseini said this: Islam does not ascribe any religious significance to Jerusalem or the Dome of the Rock. Now, this is not me making that statement. This is not an evangelical Christian making that statement. This is one of their own making that statement. The article says Lebanese Shiite Islamic scholar Husseini said in a September 22nd, 2024 interview on YouTube that all religious scholars agree that there is no religious value to Jerusalem, or specifically to the Dome of the Rock. He said no Islamic religious text or tradition exists that ascribes any religious significance to Jerusalem, and any significance that was given to it was due to political circumstances. In other words, we invented our religious right to Jerusalem because of politics and money, but our original Islamic sources give us no such indicator or right. The article quoting this Husseini says, all the Shiite religious scholars and sources of authority, with no exception, say there is no value to Jerusalem. He goes on and he says, I'm talking about the Dome of the Rock. There is no hadith or quote from the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad about its virtue or status. Moreover, it has no special status in Islam. He's quoted here as saying, so he stated that the Hajj and the circling of the Dome of the Rock, in any case, this has been exploited politically. So there is no mention and no status is given in the Shiite books. I asked for a fatwa about this from sources of authority. There is no Shiite religious significance to Jerusalem and specifically the Dome of the Rock. And as we've been talking about this, we've been running several screenshots where he has been saying the city of Jerusalem is a cultural, multi-religious, and historical city. He says there is no religious value to Jerusalem. And then we've been running a third screenshot that says there is no hadith or quote from the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, once again, this is very significant because this isn't coming from an evangelical Christian. This is coming from one of their own. If I were this guy, let me put it this way, I would watch your six or your back pretty carefully, because I don't think this guy's going to be alive for very long. One of their own in Islam saying something like this. Continuing on with this upcoming Gog-Magog invasion, notice this article from allisrael.com. October the 13th, 2024, it says Turkish President Erdogan calls for Russia, Iran, Turkey, and a Syrian alliance against Israel. Turkish President Erdogan told local media on Saturday that Russia, Iran, and Syria should do more to protect Syria's integrity. It is essential that Russia, Iran, and Syria take more effective measures against the situation which poses the greatest threat to Syria's territorial integrity. Erdogan said when asked about the recent alleged Israeli airstrike in the capital, Damascus. In May 2024, at Erdogan's urging, Turkey announced that it was halting all trade with Israel. We mentioned that a little earlier. The same month, it announced that it would join South Africa's lawsuit against Israel at the International Court of Justice at The Hague. We've reported on that in prior broadcasts. The Turkish leader has also called for an alliance of Islamic countries to stop Israeli arrogance. This particular writer says, notably, some Bible researchers have identified an alliance of Russia, Iran, and Turkey as being the fulfillment of a biblical prophecy, especially the war of Gog and Magog from Ezekiel 38. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. Do these guys just wake up one day and say, you know what, we needed to fulfill Ezekiel 38 and 39 today? As Erdogan calls the principal players, whether it's Iran, Turkey, Russia, etc., to come against Israel, which is exactly what Ezekiel prophesied would happen 2,600 years ago. The Gog-Magog alignment is extremely credible. It's more credible than it's ever been. A few more news accounts on that. Notice this particular article from Breitbart. October 11th, 2024, Putin reaffirms Russia's commitment to Iran against Israel. President Vladimir Putin told his Iranian counterpart on Friday that Moscow continues to place a high cooperation with Tehran and wishes to create a new world order. New world order in the West, and Israel no longer having a dominant position in global affairs. So we want a new world order where the United States and Israel are no longer dominant in global affairs. And so to make this happen, Putin wants to partner with Iran against what the article calls the Zionist regime. Just more evidence of the credible nature of the Gog-Magog scenario. The article says even as Putin and the representative from Iran were pledging to forge stronger ties, a high-ranking European Union official said Friday that the first sanctions against Iran for transferring ballistic missiles to Russia could be coming next week. So they're acknowledging that the two powers are transferring ballistic missiles, uh, from Iran to Russia. The leadership of those two countries saying we need to come together because we need to oppose Israel. You know, these headlines are so predominant today, we're almost numb to them. But headlines like this were almost unknown, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, even 5 years ago, even just a few years ago. Now they recur with great regularity. You'll notice also this particular headline, this one coming from the, let's see here, this would be Breitbart. No, I've got that wrong. This would be the, let's see, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Erdogan calls for Russia, Iranian, Turkey alliance against Israel. We just dealt with that. Let's put up that screenshot, if we could, from X. And here it says Putin reaffirms commitment to Iran versus Israel. And it says breaking, Russia and Iran just cemented a $1.7 billion arms deal. With that being said, let's go to this Daily Sabah article. Again, all very recent. October the 21st, 2024, and it says Iran vows continued effort with Turkey to stop Israeli attacks. Here's two more players in the Gog-Magog alignment. Iran and Turkey will continue working together to stop Israel's attacks on Gaza and Lebanon, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson said Monday. The two great nations of the world and regional powers, Iran and Turkey, are working to stop attacks on Gaza and Lebanon with determination, the spokesperson said. So what's interesting about these articles is they're not just dealing with powers in place against Israel, but they're dealing with these different players, whether it's Russia, Iran and Turkey, not just being in place, but cooperating with each other. And cooperating each other with for what basis? To oppose Israel that they call the Zionist regime. So these nations are, as a stage setting for the coming Gog-Magog invasion, are singing off the same song sheet. They're working in harmony with each other in preparation for this invasion. God is moving the chess pieces of our world all around so that the specific intricacies of His Word will be fulfilled in the tribulation period. Now, one of the great questions in this Gog-Magog invasion is, what about North Africa? I've heard a lot of people say, we're a long way away from the Gog-Magog invasion because we don't see a Gog-Magog presence in what we would call North Africa. We mentioned earlier the Sudan and Libya playing a role in this invasion. I mean, certainly there's no Russian or Iranian presence in North Africa. So, we're a long way away from this particular invasion. We'll think again. Iran, as I speak, is developing a tremendous presence in North Africa. Notice this article from the Spectator, very recent, October the 20th, 2024. It's entitled, How Iran's Proxies Are Spreading in Africa. The article says, but Tehran has been hard at work creating other Hamas, Hezbollah clones as possible in order to extend its reach. In other words, Iran, when it reacts against Israel, tries to do it first through its proxies, Hezbollah and the Houthis. Now Iran doesn't even try to do that anymore. She just fires projectiles from her own country into Israel. But these proxies are very important to Iranian supremacy and aggressiveness in the region. And the article talks about how she's developing those exact same proxies in North Africa, meaning that North Africa, whether it's Sudan, Libya, etc., is now cooperating with Iran, which you would expect to happen if North Africa and Iran, along with Russia and Turkey, are going to invade Israel in the last days. The article says Iran has sometimes competed, mostly cooperated with Russia to extend its influence. Their common goal everywhere is to weaken Western influence and exploit France's setbacks from Mali to Niger to Algeria, North African countries. It says before the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon was injured by an exploding Hezbollah pager, Grinberg wrote that Iranian diplomats provided cover for Hezbollah's activities in Africa and maintained contacts with Hezbollah's grassroots operatives on the ground in African countries where Shiite communities such as Nigeria, Tanzania, and Niger were located. So there is a Gog-Magog presence in North Africa. Let's focus just for a moment here on the Sudan. In my book, The Middle East Meltdown, I show you why Sudan clearly is one of the invaders of the nation of Israel in the last days. It's called in the Bible Ethiopia. But the modern nation of Ethiopia is misleading. The ancient country of Ethiopia extended all the way into the Sudan. And so Ethiopia clearly is one of these invaders of the land of Israel in the last days. And so an alliance between Iran, Persia, and the Sudan on the eve of this invasion would be expected, wouldn't it? And that's exactly what you see developing. Notice this particular article from the GatestoneInstitute.com, September the 30th, 2024. The article says, Iran, having just two of its major proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, seriously degraded, is setting its sights on a new consolation prize proxy to use as an additional base of operations, the Sudan. Iran has for a while been trying to establish a port in the Sudan's major coastal city port, Sudan. A major port and foothold in Sudan will enable Iran to accomplish two of its goals: to continue encircling Israel in a ring of fire by opening another front from which to attack the small Jewish nation from the southwest, and to further control all international shipping in the Red Sea. Now, did you hear what I just read there, folks? Iran, or Persia, is one of the players in the Gog-Magog invasion, is developing a relationship with the Sudan, another player in the Gog-Magog invasion. An alliance between the two is forming, and it's not just economic, according to this Gatestone Institute. It's for the specific purpose of attacking the nation of Israel from the southwest, which is exactly what Ezekiel 38 and 39 says is coming. I mean, the invasion you saw from the map earlier is coming from all of those different directions, including Sudan and the southwest. And here's the Gatestone Institute acknowledging that that's why Iran wants a presence in the Sudan. Let me read that again, because this is just mind-boggling. A major port and foothold in Sudan will enable Iran to accomplish two of its goals. The first is to continue encircling Israel in a ring of fire by opening yet another front from which to attack the small Jewish nation from the southwest. So we're living in astronomical times where the Gog-Magog scenario is being developed. Here's more from this article. It says, in the meantime, the IRGC of Iran, while working to establish a naval base in Port Sudan, has been providing SAF with drones and advanced military equipment. This positions Sudan as a possible new base of operations for Iran against Israel. So Iran wants to attack Israel from the southwest. We need a presence in the southwest, Iran says. Last line in this particular article. This new potential land grab by Iran in collaboration with Russia and China, haven't even had the opportunity in this broadcast to talk about the role of China in eschatology, poses yet another security threat not only to Israel but also to the entire region and the United States. It's hoped that the U.S. government, or whoever wins the November election, will give this emerging flashpoint urgent attention. Boy, we're living in some critical messianic times. So just by way of review, in this particular broadcast, in this particular prophecy update, covered some major issues related to prophecy, movements in Israel towards temple number 3, Israel about to get its hands perhaps on gold and silver, the world, including the United States of America, turning against Israel in the last days, and the minute details of the Gog and Magog invasion are coming sharply into focus. Things are not getting more and more murky in that department. They're getting more and more crystal clear. And so all of this to say, folks, we're living in messianic times. I hope you know Jesus personally. If you don't, there's an easy way to do that. You hear the gospel, which is the finished work of Jesus on the cross through his death, burial, resurrection, and ascension, and then you place your personal trust for your salvation and the safekeeping of your soul into what Jesus did. And just like that, you're a born-again new child of God, and you will be taken from this earth in the rapture before these things, we believe, largely manifest themselves on the earth. And if the signs for the coming 7-year tribulation period are this graphic, then the rapture which precedes the tribulation period must be coming even faster. And so I can't think of a better time than to know Jesus personally. I hope you do. And we'll continue in our next broadcast with another prophecy update here on Pastor's Point of View. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. God bless you.